Well, I think we go ahead and get started. Hello everyone, I'm Barbara Milligan. I am the Membership Director for Kids Chance of America and going to be doing a recap of the conference. So if you were not able to join us, it was a fantastic conference. Amber is with me today, and she is also watching this because she wasn't able to join us because in the 12 hours before she was to leave, she came down with COVID. So she was not able to join, and she's going to be learning everything as well. So I'm going to actually go through this pretty quickly because there's a lot of material to cover, but I do want to just share the highlights with you and talk about some of the sessions and high points of the sessions, and also share a little bit about KCOA with you and what is new in KCOA. Amber's going to be dropping links into the chat box as we go. So all of the presentations are available online. So if there's a particular session that you're interested in, then you can click on the link and go ahead and download that, or the handouts. And we also have some other materials that will be available to you as we go along. So I'll start with the strategic plan, because one of the things that happened at conference is that Kids Chance of America released its strategic plan and kind of went through the highlights of that with everyone. The national vision has changed just a little bit. I think the last vision was trying to get to 50 states, which we are there, which is exciting. Or I should say we're at like 49.75 because Wyoming is in process. So not officially up and running yet, but getting very close. So the mission vision has been tweaked just a little bit, but essentially remains what we continue to try to do, which is support the families of those injured on the job and the students. There are 6 goals outlined in the new strategic plan, and I know I personally am very excited about the plan and getting to work with all of you as we walk down the road to implement it. The first is to develop the pipeline of eligible kids. Some of the states struggle with identifying students. Not all do, but some of them do. So we're really going to try to hone all the sources that are feeding this pipeline of kids. The second goal is to align state support to meet the states where they are. As you know, the states are all different. They come in all shapes and sizes. The cultures are different. The work comp cultures are different in each of the states. So it's really trying to align the national resources with what the states need individually, and help all of the states get to the level that you would like to be at. Goal 3 is to strengthen the leadership pipeline, both for national and for the states. I think you'll be seeing a board education program rolled out for the states to participate in, as well as our national board members. And part of this leadership goal will also be an executive director transition, as Vicki, our longtime director, will be stepping down in 2024. So we'll be working on the transition for that. So leadership pipeline, goal 3. Goal 4 is investing in the infrastructure to support national growth. So that's, as we're growing the pipeline of eligible kids and we have more kids to support, how can we grow national to support the states, and ensuring that we have the resources to deliver that support. So that's goal 4. So that might include, like, how do we help states get administrative support? How do we bring on this kaleidoscope or scholarship platform to all the states? How do we help states with database and ensure that we're not burdening the states with too much work in that regard, and that national can do certain things to help support the growth. Goal 5 was secure the funding. Of course, you've got to have money to implement the plan. So that's not only at the national level, but supporting the states in all of your fundraising efforts. And then goal 6, and I'm excited about this goal, and I hope you are too, is exploring other opportunities to support the families of injured workers. And I think you'll see as I go through the sessions, especially the keynote session we kicked off with, we're seeing other needs. So how can we as a Kids Chance community support our students beyond just the scholarship? What are the needs? What are other entities doing that we might partner with, or what are the gaps that we might want to step into? And we'll be working with all of you in the States to determine, to have you inform, what are these other opportunities, and also work with your students to inform how this moves forward. So very exciting strategic plan that we'll be working with you to implement. Kids Chance of America board, we did have an election. So just to let you know, our new president is Dana Genheimer, and she was a state president for Kids Chance of North Carolina, and she now steps into the role of president of Kids Chance of America. And then for the CSO meeting, we did have 3 different breakout sessions looking at developing student ambassador programs at the state levels, the levels of excellence that the CSO came up with last year, looking at, is everybody on board with that? And if so, how do we implement it? And then looking at shared resources. So those shared resources are, do we have shared bookkeeping services or administrative services, or a database, or scholarship? What are the resources we could share to save expense at the state level and share those resources effectively? So that's really kind of what happened in terms of the national level at the meeting. Our conference kicked off with Jackie Bright, who's the director of the National Scholarship Providers Association. And she really looked at how COVID is reshaping the work that we do as scholarship providers. And it was very interesting, her presentation. She really outlined 3 areas that they're seeing some challenges in. One is declining enrollment among higher education institutions. One is a widening of the socioeconomic gap. And one is a change in the perceived value of education. And I suspect those of you here have noticed that there's a lot of discussion about whether college is worth it. And students are looking at other opportunities. So in terms of the declining enrollment, the impact on us as scholarship providers is to really look at what our requirements are, especially around test scores. So there's kind of a shift away from focusing on SAT and ACT scores. Also, in terms of addressing the socioeconomic gap, she suggests that the name of the game is flexibility. So looking at how else can funds be used? Can they be provided directly to the student? Can we remove timelines for using funds? So it's really about being flexible. And these are some interesting ideas for us to think about in our Kids Chance community. She said that the members of the Scholarship Providers Association, what she saw was that they increased their awards, they increased the amount of their awards, and they also established emergency funds that would address things beyond the scholarship needs. Then in terms of perceived value, the trends are that they're seeing shorter training programs, certificate programs. And what that means for us as scholarship providers is that we have to think about, do we want to shift our requirements? Do we want to support students in training programs or certificate programs and not simply in higher education programs? So a lot of things for us to think about from this presentation, and it really provided the overview of what's happening with the scholarship providers on a national basis. Flexibility is really the key, and we're going to be diving into this further to see how we might need to respond from our Kids Chance community. So The second keynote we had on Saturday was growing trends in financial aid. This was very financial aid focused. And if you're someone in the States who's dealing with financial aid, then I certainly recommend you take a look at the presentation. I'm not going to share it in depth because it is very, it's a very dense presentation. I will direct you to the handouts that she had. And those handouts are super helpful. And they go through lots of ways that when you're working with a student, you can help them access money. And we were so impressed by her resources that we're actually looking at how we might work with her to develop some state by state specific resources for you to share with your students, because we know that our students are more apt to really be facing socioeconomic challenges, and they may need more resources. So we're looking at working with her to develop those for the states. Another thing that she had in her presentation was information about the financial aid appeal process. So if you're working with students, sometimes you have a student whose their parents' workplace injury is recent, and that would impact their financial aid, so they will need to appeal, or the FAFSA may not actually take into account the full complexity of the family situation. So she even has in her handout a sample financial aid appeal, which I thought was terrific. So please have a look at those handouts and download those and share those with your scholarship chairs. I will tell you, we are going to be having a scholarship roundtable, hopefully in June. And so keep your eye out for information about that. And do try to have somebody from your organization attend, even if the scholarship chair can't attend, because we're going to be drilling into a lot of these issues. Deborah Benson presented on understanding how trauma impacts our students. And it's for those of you, I know Dawn's here, some of you who are working more in the medical field and the rehab field, you already have heard the term trauma-informed care. So we were trying to give an overview of how trauma impacts our students. Because if we know one thing, we know that every single one of our students has been through a traumatic experience because of their parents' injury or death. So she talked about how this can manifest and what we should be aware of. She talked about the effect of parental loss on children and how it can cause depression and increased vulnerability to subsequent negative life events. And I know as a parent who my sons lost their father when they were in high school, I know I am always thinking about that last one and how do we prevent that? So these are things to be aware of with the students that you're interacting with. And even injuries, and I thought this was interesting because while parental injuries really create challenges for the family and for the student, it also can create growth opportunities for the students. And so, there can be a positive side to it. She did point out that COVID, on top of the traumas our students have already experienced, unfortunately, they now have the pandemic impact. And so this has further exacerbated the stress that the students are already under. And she gave a statistic that was something like 20% of students were experiencing mental health challenges before the pandemic. It's now 50% of students. So the pandemic, and so you layer that on top of existing traumas, it's a pretty significant impact on our students. So her advice was be aware that our students have had trauma. Don't try to ignore how this might have impacted the family and the student in how they're dealing with you or interacting with you. Listen, observe, validate, and offer support whenever you can. So the next presentation we had, these are the Friday presentations, was from Dr. Brenda Wells of East Carolina University. And I had asked her to do a presentation on volunteers. She has written extensively about millennials. And so she did a presentation on how we integrate. Right now, I think there are 5 generations of volunteers in the workplace. And how do we integrate all those different generations? And I'm gonna go through a little bit of her presentation. The great thing about Brenda is she's not only a professor and a risk management professional, but she's also a stand-up comedian. So I cannot replicate her delivery, but it was pretty entertaining. She laid out the different generations for us that are in the workplace and about how many of those folks are represented. And then she really wanted to define the generation so we understand that these generations are really about what happens to us in our formative years. And that is what makes the generation have its personality. So I'm going to go through this really quickly, but I found this fascinating. And in fact, I feel like this presentation should be required education for every workplace in America. I had so many light bulbs that went on while I was participating in this. I'm like, oh, now I get that. Well, that's why they act that way. Well, that's why they do this. So I hope you'll find it useful. She pointed out the traditionalists were that this was the TV family of the traditionalist generation. And for me, as we go along, you'll see this TV family really says a lot about the different generations. So here we've got Leave It to Beaver. Amber, you're so young, I don't even know if you know Leave It to Beaver or not, but Leave It to Beaver, the dad goes off to work, the mom vacuums in her pearls, and we've got the 2 perfect children. Even Beaver, who's a little imperfect, is still perfect. These are the influences on that generation, and these are the characteristics. So these were the company men. My mom, her credit card still says Mrs. Douglas Milligan. She's in the traditionalist generation. And strong, they had pensions, and they had these strong feelings about loyalty and work. Then you have the baby boomers, the next generation. These are their influences. They're very different than the traditionalists. This is their TV family. Oh my gosh, it's a blended family. Although I will point out Mike and Carol were not divorced. They were both widows, but they had a blended family. So this was really a big change for American television. So they had more women in the workplace. This generation defined the term workaholic, so they worked a lot, very concerned with physical appearance, which I found hilarious, especially as I was getting ready for this webinar since I am a baby boomer. So Gen X is the next generation, and these are their influences. So you see their influences are really quite different than those of the baby boomers. This is their TV family. So Roseanne, you think about how these children interacted with their parents versus how the Leave It to Beaver children interacted with their parents. It's very different. And that's informing this generation and their culture and what their characteristics are. So they were latchkey kids. They work to live. They don't live to work. And they value learning. So very different from the baby boomers. Then you have the millennials. And if Dr. Wells had any message, it was stop bashing the millennials. Stop it. So I got that message. So Amber, I promise, no more millennial bashing. And this was very helpful to go through the influences on the millennials. They've had so much more stimulation and input than the previous generations did. And this was their TV family. And I got a kick out of this because now my TV family was the Brady Bunch. This is my kids' TV family. I would not let them watch The Simpsons. They still hold this against me, but it was just so different for me. I just was horrified by it. So you can see how that TV family really encapsulates the differences in the generations. So millennial characteristics, quite different, very fast paced, quick decisions, quick reflexes. They like change, instant gratification. And Dr. Wells, she recommended that if you're not a millennial, you need to find a mentor who's a millennial. So I thought this was a terrific idea. And certainly for your Kids Chance organizations, designate a millennial mentor for your Kids Chance. And because they have so much to offer and can really help us do things that we're not necessarily doing. Generation Z is the rising generation. They've school shootings, think about that as an influence. And this is their family. This is their TV family. So think about the change from the Leave It to Beaver to Modern Family, quite a difference. And I think this graphic of the child in the womb with the iPad really says it all. They're digital natives. They're very culturally diverse. They're very accepting and resilient. So her message was, we all want to be respected, have trustworthy leaders. We want to learn. So we're all after the same thing. And what's really important is to understand that each generation learns differently and that each generation communicates differently. And that if you're working with a traditionalist, they may want that face-to-face meeting versus the Gen Zers who are digital everything and email is so old-fashioned. Why are you using it? So understand how this works in your Kids Chance organization and even in your family and your workplace, because there's a lot of good information here that she had to offer. Kim Stazala did a presentation on working together to find kids. And I'm not going to go into this too much because, again, we are going to be hosting the Scholarship Roundtable next month. But she did really look at what she sees as the 6 kind of pipeline feeders for our kids and how you can maximize those. So you can look into her presentation if you're interested in that. And we have Rain Bennett, who I have to say was a cool millennial who did a presentation on impact storytelling. And I think this is really useful. He laid out a very simple process. And I loved this quote: storytelling, deliver information by wrapping it in emotion. And honestly, when you're telling a story about Kids Chance and you want people to become engaged, you want people to volunteer and to donate, that emotional piece, that's the most important thing to remember. You got to wrap it in emotion. So he laid out a simple story structure: problem, journey, resolution. And this little graphic, I think, says it all. So you might want to just look at the graphic and download this graphic and share it with the folks who are doing your outreach and your public relations and telling your stories, because this is it. And for us in the Kids Chance community, we've got a normal world going along, and the inciting incident is always going to be that workplace injury. So that's pretty simple to figure out how we tell our stories. That's the incident. Then the journey, what happens to the family and the student. The climax is the Kids Chance scholarship and Kids Chance supports. And then how does the student's life change after that? And it's actually good to have students in your arsenal who are alums so that you can have that backward view of what happened to them after college and what was part of that journey. But I thought this was a really great graphic for you to use when you're thinking about telling your stories. And so here's the little cheat sheet that he gave for storytelling. And I have to say that last one is super important. There are so many times when I see people telling stories and they're a great story, but they have no call to action. What is it you want the reader or the listener or the viewer to do? So be sure you're including that call to action. So another presentation was building an active and engaged board of directors. I'm going to go into this presentation a little bit more with a little bit more detail, because this is such the constant question from the states. How do we engage the board? How do we develop new board members? So this was a wonderful presentation from Jean Allen, who is a board source certified governance instructor. She was terrific. And she started us out with outlining the top 10 duties of a nonprofit board. And I think, Amber, that you have that link that you can share. I would encourage all of you to look at this. It's a board source resource. The 10 duties, 10 basic responsibilities of a nonprofit board. And so they're listed over here on the left. So this is a great exercise for your board. Go take a look at the article, download the list, and then send it out to your board and have the board rank it. So rank, what do they do best? Number one. What do they do second best? Number two. And what do they all the way down to number 10? And then have them submit that. And at your board meeting, share the results. Usually what we find is that board members think they do a good job with mission, financial oversight, and legal oversight. And that stands to reason. Those are very black and white, straightforward, easy to understand. Where boards tend to rank themselves lowest is on community relations and outreach, board development, composition, and fundraising. So I would really encourage you to do this with your board. I think it's a great exercise. And then you can see, where do we need to do better? So Jean went into the board building cycle, which is really recruiting, these first 3 steps, engaging in red here, and then revitalization in green. And she had some really great ideas that, and I've been doing this a long time, but I took a lot away from her session. So the board building cycle, first of all, is identify. So she poses some questions, and then she poses some actions for each of these 9 steps. And what I would encourage you to do is look at these questions as questions you can pose to your board. And think about, maybe you have a board agenda, and every board meeting you have, you pose a question, and you leave 15 minutes for discussion of the question. So for identifying, what do we need on the board? And how do we ensure that all the voices are heard? And then the actions she proposed. She proposed using a matrix. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but I actually had a matrix, and I just tweaked it a little bit so it would be appropriate for Kids Chance by work comp representation, state area of the state. You could add ethnicity here if you wanted to. You can email us and we can send you this, so you don't have to do your own. And then give it to all of your board members and have them complete it for themselves. And then put it all together and see, where are the gaps? You'll begin to see, well, we don't have representation from this part of the work comp industry, or we don't have anybody on our team that's really good at the governance piece or human resources. So if you just email us, we can share this board matrix with you. So the second step in the process is cultivation. And here are the questions she poses. Why would someone want to join our board? It's a great question for you, for your board members to talk about and chew on. And then what are the actions that we could take to address the cultivation and better cultivate new board members? The third step is recruitment. So great question. What got our current board members to commit? Again, go around the table at your board meetings and ask this question. And then you can build actions to help you better recruit the new board members that will be coming on. Number 4 in the process is orientation. Love this question. What do we wish we had known when we joined the board? Aren't there always things you learned after you joined the board that you wish you had known before you joined it? Yes, there are always things you wish you had known. So orientation, board buddies, we're actually, one of the things on my to-do list for the coming year is to help build out a board orientation kit that the states can use and model to your own wishes for your own needs, but that will have, like, everybody can go online. It's a kit. Here's what you need. Here are the forms. Here's the information. But it's important to have a good orientation and not just a 3-ring binder that you're handing off to new board members and that's it. 3-ring binders, they're kind of passé. If you have a millennial mentor, they're going to tell you that 3-ring binder is passé, so don't do it anymore. So we're going to look at some new strategies for how we can encourage and help you support board orientation. Then how do you involve board members? And I know this is a question I get all the time from states. How do we engage our board members and make sure everybody's doing some of the work? So this is making sure you have appropriate committees and protocols, that you have a life cycle to your board members, term limits, you have engaging meetings, and adding these questions to your agendas is one way to make your meetings much more interactive and engaging. Number 6 is educating the board members. These are the questions she poses. And then what are specific training that we should be offering? And what kind of discussion should we be having? Evaluation, how do we assess board members before renewing them? Or do we just renew every board member regardless? Probably not, but how do you handle that? Doing an assessment, we have assessments available, both board member assessment and organizational assessments that we can share with you, and having individual board members assess themselves can be really enlightening for board members. And it sometimes will help them understand if they are underperforming. So setting goals, having assessments, evaluating your board meetings. I used to have a board chair that would just send out a simple email after the board meeting, right after. She would say, tell me how we did. What did you like about the meeting? What didn't you like? What can we do better next time? And maybe not every board member would respond, but she would get input from the board members, and then that would influence how we approach the next board meeting. Number 8, rotate, and that means, yes, having term limits. There really are a lot of Kids Chance organizations that do not have term limits. And I understand the reason why. We have some people who've been really important to Kids Chance organizations, but having rotation of ideas and energy and influence is important. So asking these questions and developing a term limit policy, having that leadership pipeline, these are all important things to this board building cycle. And then finally, celebrating. You've got to pat yourself on the back. I mean, that you're all working very hard. Your board members are working hard. You're doing important things for our students. And so step back and take the time to pat yourselves on the back and celebrate, and find ways to do that everybody on the board will buy into. So that's the board building cycle. And I'll leave you in terms of board building with this. She really encouraged us to break out into small groups. So I think that breaking out into small groups and asking questions of your board are 2 big takeaways for me from this. And she said, you know, if you have a big important decision you need to make in your organization, divide the group. When you can do this on Zoom or you can do this in person. All right, this group, you go and for 15 minutes, you're going to go talk about the pro point of view for this decision. And this group, you're going to go talk about the con point of view. And be sure that if you have people with strong feelings, put them on the other side for this exercise. Then bring them back together and have each side present their case for that decision. It's a wonderful way to get everybody involved. And I think you'll see, if you're a member of the CSO, I think you'll see us start to integrate some of these strategies as we move forward. So we have more small group discussions, we're posing more questions. So some great strategies from Jean Allen. I really encourage you to look at that presentation. Then we had Nikki, who is a member of the More Than Giving team and also working with KCOA on development. She talked about turning acknowledgement into stewardship. And I'm not going to go into great detail here because Nikki is doing the webinar in June about developing an annual giving program. Some of these things will be included. So Amber just popped in a link that you can sign up to the webinar. The stewardship is super important because the typical retention rate for nonprofit organizations to retain their donors is between 30 and 40%. So you think about that. You're only retaining 30 to 40% of your donors. That means as an organization, you are a hamster on a wheel. You're constantly on this treadmill of trying to get new donors in. So what we're promoting is that you focus on donor stewardship, which is building these strong, healthy relationships after that first donation to ensure that they're going to make a second donation. So it's all of these strategies for communicating with and thanking those donors. So she laid out a way to start building a stewardship plan in your organization, maybe having a stewardship team as a little subset of your fundraising committee. And their job really is just to steward those donors and make sure that they feel loved and appreciated. So your donors who give again, that second time, not third time, they give 42% more than just that donor who only gives one time. So in fundraising, in the fundraising world, it is all about stewardship and retaining those donors. So she had some great ideas, and you can download that presentation. And she did focus on the 7, which you may have heard from us before, but that's really making sure you touch that donor 7 times before you ask them for money again. So what's your plan to do that? And how are you utilizing your board members and your volunteers to help with that? Because if this is all left to the president, there's no way you can get it all done. You've got to share the load and get other board members and volunteers involved in this. But it is one of the most important things you can do in fundraising. And I encourage you to participate in that June webinar that Nikki's giving. You Are the Firewall from Jeff Heather was a presentation about internet security. And I have to say, Jeff Heather gave this presentation to the staff a few months ago. And I was a little overwhelmed afterwards. Like, I just wanted to stay off the internet for the rest of my life because it seems a little overwhelming once you drill into it. So I encourage you to look at his presentation. If this is an issue for you personally, for your kids' chance, or if you work for a smaller company that doesn't have a cybersecurity department, you might want to look at this presentation. And Jeff is a great guy, but he starts out by saying, never use the same password over and over again. How many of you use the same password over and over again? It's pretty common. He said, use a passphrase like you see at the bottom and make sure it's different for every website. Really? So then his next piece of advice is use a password management tool to help you with that. and it encrypts the password. So it's not just Google. Don't just use Google, but the password piece, I think, is his most important message. He also talked about phishing, and I know we've had this with my partner's company. His employees will get emails about their paychecks, and it's all phishing. It's all a scam. You got to be super careful. And of course, it's not. Now it's coming in by text, not just by email. Like, you can't go anywhere without having this spam and malware. And he especially encourages you to be careful when you're clicking around on the internet. And he also has, you see Facebook here, he says, please do not use Facebook to log into things. You know how sometimes you can use that as a login, they'll say log in with Facebook. Don't do that. Don't ever do that. And be sure your data is backed up. And that is really important, especially for Kids Chance organizations. You got to make sure that data is in the cloud. Got to make sure. And he gives 10 cybersecurity tips for your nonprofit. So you can download that. Then Vicki did a session called Remembering Your Why. And the people that participated said this was really impactful. Unfortunately, there's no presentation PowerPoint that went with it, but I put this together, and I'm going to suggest that you take a screenshot of it, or take a picture with your phone, or just email us and we can send you this. So here is how you would approach this with your board at a board meeting. So break your board members into pairs of 2. And again, even if you're doing a Zoom meeting, you can do this on Zoom. Give them the top 5 questions. Okay. What led you to become involved in Kids Chance? How has it impacted your life? What's your greatest contribution? If you have board members that aren't as involved as you think they should be, this exercise will be meaningful for them, and it may move them into greater participation. So pairs of 2, go over these questions, then bring everybody back together into the group and share your why with the group. Go around the table and share it. And it may open up avenues for you to think about how else you might support Kids Chance in ways that you haven't thought about before that will come out of this exercise. And you may think of other people that could get involved because of this why exercise that you've done. So this is, I just can't encourage you enough to do this with your board. I think the people who did it at the session found it super helpful and impactful. So this is a board meeting right here. I think it will make a big difference. And then fundraising ideas to copy and share. Hey, that was me. And what I did was essentially I went around the states and just looked at what is everybody doing and shared all those ideas. And I encouraged everyone to use social media as a way to find ideas, because the Kids Chance community is doing amazing things to raise money. And there's so many clever and innovative ideas, but we don't know about them if you don't share them. So share them with me, please, because we do keep a running list of state fundraising efforts. Share them on social media. Follow your fellow state organizations in addition to Kids Chance of America. You'll get a lot of ideas from your other states, and magnify what the other states are doing. And I know Amy's on here from California. They've done a great job of doing that. Pennsylvania does that. New York has been doing a great job with social media. What they're doing is they're looking at what other Kids Chance organizations are sharing on social media, and then they're magnifying that. They're saying, hey, look at what Kids Chance of California is doing. And that helps us gain more bandwidth in terms of an audience. And also, we should be bragging on each other, because There's some really wonderful things happening among the 50 state organizations. And please use the hashtags, because that's the easiest way for you to find these ideas, is if you're using these hashtags. If you don't have these hashtags on your post, then it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. So I went through the types of fundraising events that we tend to see across the Kids Chance Network, and I'm not going to go into these. You're welcome to download the presentation, or I'm here, ask me, call me, email me, ask me anything. What I did just want to touch upon, though, were fundraising trends. Two trends that I focused on. One was donor advised funds. If you don't know what donor advised funds are, you need to know what they are. So this is the future of fundraising for individual donors, is through donor advised funds. So I'm a donor, I've got $100,000. I'm going to give it to my community foundation, or I'm going to give it to Schwab Charitable or Vanguard and Fidelity Foundations. I'm going to give them my money. And then every year I'm going to tell them where to send money. I want $1,000 to go to Kids Chance of Illinois and $1,000 to go to Kids Chance of Nebraska, etc. Right? So the donor becomes the recommender. The donor is actually Fidelity. They now own the money. It's a great way for donors to manage their philanthropy, but you as a recipient need to know what it is when you receive that check. You also need to be in their systems, because that way the donor can easily find you. So you should make sure you're on the radar of every community foundation in your state, as well as the three big ones, Fidelity, Vanguard, and Schwab. You can go into their website. You can enter your organization into their system. It's important to be there if you want to be found. This is the wave of the future, so please be there. Also note, it's not tax deductible to the donor. So when I give my money to Fidelity, I get my tax receipt from Fidelity. When it goes to you and you give me my acknowledgement letter, don't include a tax receipt, because then I get to deduct it twice, and that's not possible. IRS will not like that. I have a little white paper I did on donor advised funds, kind of explains all of this, has widgets you can put on your website, has all the links. If you're interested in that, you can just email me. The other trend in fundraising is peer-driven fundraising, also called social fundraising, social giving. This is making fundraising fun. So you can tell that millennials had a big impact on peer-driven fundraising, because this speaks to how millennials like to do their fundraising. They want it to be quick. They want it to be fun. So that's why there's the gamification of it. They want to share it with others. They want to be involved. This usually requires mobile-friendly software. However, there's Facebook, for example, is that's an example of peer-driven fundraising, where you can use Facebook for Giving Tuesday and put it out to your friends, and you can see how much is being raised. California, Amy, the popcorn sales that you guys did recently with, I can't remember the name of the popcorn company off the top of my head. Amy, if you know it, you can pop it into the chat box. But they actually made it possible for Kids Chance of California to kind of do this gamification and peer-driven fundraising. So they have a leaderboard. They can see, that Kristen, who's the president of California, she's number 3 in the fundraiser, and she's trying to get to number 1. And it makes it fun. And in that case, they provide the platform for you to do that. You don't have to have one on your own. So there are times when you can use other platforms. If you're going to do it yourself, you kind of need to have some kind of mechanism to make your fundraising page is available to your donors. But this really is the wave of the future. All of you can use this for your existing fundraising efforts, your sales, your golf tournaments, your Giving Tuesday campaign. Peer-driven fundraising can and should be incorporated into your efforts. It's the way, especially to get younger donors to participate. And if you're looking to grow beyond just the corporate giving and attract more individuals, this is especially important for peer-driven. And it's a great thing you can personally do. Like if you have a birthday and you really you're a baby boomer and you don't need any gifts, right? Because your house is full of stuff like mine is, then you can use peer-to-peer fundraising and have people give to Kids Chance through that. The Ice Bucket Challenge and the Grow a Beard Challenge. These are all terrific examples of peer-to-peer fundraising. So I really want peer-to-peer fundraising and donor advised funds to be on your radar. Another trend in fundraising is monthly giving. And Nikki is going to focus on that in her June webinar. She's going to be talking about that. So that really ends the sessions that we had. It gives you a really quick overview of all the sessions. And so, in fact, the people who attended conference didn't get to go to all the sessions, but you guys just went to all of them. So there you go. I do want to share my feedback about the student stories with you. The last event we had at conference was our student luncheon. And these are not our students from conference because we don't have our photos yet. So they're just some of our general students. And we had 2 students there, one who was actually an alum and one who was a current student. And it was those student stories that to me made all the difference. And I know that you guys, most of you include student stories in all of your events and your programming. If you don't, try to do that. It is the single thing that will have the most impact on your audience. And I actually went to the table that our students were sitting at before the panel, and I could tell the girl especially was nervous because it was the first time she had done it. And I said, this is a room full of people who are here, who came to Charlotte, North Carolina to be together, to learn how they can better support you. You will find no friendlier audience. They're here because they care about you. And they just want to know that they've made a difference. And boy, did she deliver. She was terrific. But if you can really tee up your students to do that, I think it was helpful. The other student was an alum, and he was actually Kids Chance of North Carolina's first ever scholarship recipient. And so he's been with them for a while. He's done several programs. He went with them through undergraduate degree in criminal law enforcement, whatever you call it, and then a graduate degree in ministry. And his family was also there. And you could see and hear from both the student and the family that the Kids Chance had truly impacted the trajectory of his life. So you go back to that storytelling graphic that I showed you. This was that story in action. And they were so powerful. So I think for me, it was my first conference. That brought it all together for me in seeing the impact of the work that we do, that you are doing. And I encourage you to, and I know, and the student said this, the student said, not all students can participate. Not all students have, the personality that they're going to be able to get up and do a presentation or tell their story. So you really have to address it on a student by student basis. But so it will take some work, but the work is so worth it. And the Hezekiah, who was the original Kids Chance in North Carolina student, his mom and dad were there. And that alone, just seeing the entire family was so meaningful. And Hezekiah's mom said during the student panel, she said, I want you guys to understand that Kids Chance is so much more than a scholarship. And for me, that encapsulated it all right there. Everything I do, trying to help Kids Chance and support this organization and US States, that was it for me. It made a difference in these two students' lives, and it made a difference in the lives of their families. So people sometimes wonder, like, why should I go to conference? Well, I can tell you just from the emotion that I felt throughout all of conference, but especially with the students, that's why you should go to conference, because it is a truly special experience. So my top takeaways from conference was, wow, there are nearly 1,000 Kids Chance volunteers now doing this work. And when you think about the power of that community and how much more powerful we are as a network when we take the time to connect with each other and to connect with our students. This is important work that you're doing, and it is a powerful community. And for me, it all comes down to Hezekiah and his mom, and seeing that you are having this generational impact on our kids and on the families they'll have and on their kids. So you're ensuring that they're not the victims of the circumstance that they find themselves in because their parent suffered a workplace accident. It's pretty powerful stuff, and that's what conference does. So I sure hope that you can attend next year, or that if you had people in your organization that couldn't attend, this will be up on our YouTube channel. They can just have a listen. It'll be up in about a week. And please get next year's conference on your calendar. It is May 4th, 5th, and 6th in Indianapolis. We have a terrific hotel in downtown Indianapolis picked out. I'm so excited. It's right next to the stadium. One of the best things about this hotel is that they will have food, snacks, and beverages and coffee available all day long. You don't even have to ask for it. So what could be better than that? It's going to be a great conference. It's also race month, Indy 500 month in May. So it's a big deal to be in Indy in May, and I'm quite excited about it. I hope you'll join us. We're out of time, so not a lot of time for questions. What I would say to you is, if you have questions and suggestions, please email them to us. You can either use the Kids Chance email or my personal email. We would love to have your suggestions for next year's conference sessions, for webinar sessions, and please also use those hashtags. Post and use the hashtags and follow your fellow Kids Chance organizations. You guys are doing such tremendous work, and I am honored to be working with you. Thank you for all you do. Keep up the good work. Thanks, everyone.